Welcome a cold Friday in West Lafayette. We always start Mike with the weather report here on Golden Black Live, but want to first welcome Mike Bobinski and Brian Neubert to segment one of Golden Black Live and thank our sponsors. And that, of course, is Triple X, on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, stayed HDI tonight. And, of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, someone we all know and love. Trent is often seen on the scorers table for women's basketball, but also does his work on the chain gang for football too. So we appreciate that. Mike, nothing going on in your world these days. As I said, we appreciate your time, but we're going to start a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about football. We heard from Jeff Brom yesterday. I know you planned for them to work outside today on February 19th. It's only 20 below zero, so they'll be inside. But no, spring ball starts today. We'll run for another month, but Jeff Brom's sounded good yesterday, sounded enthusiastic, and they seem to be ready to go.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting and an important spring for us in lots of ways when you're introducing new voices, new coaches, new philosophy into the mix, making sure that we make the best use of this time and our players get comfortable with the approach, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. I think it'll be a time when we're going to want to make sure we get some really positive things done, and I trust that that's clearly the plan and that's the objective. And looking forward to being out there this afternoon, or being in there this afternoon and watching them get started.
Mike, what are you kind of seeing behind the scenes that kind of gives you that trust that things are still moving in the direction you want to move in?
Sure. Well, as you would probably expect, Brian, post the end of last season, be that as it may, a season, what constituted the season.
Right.
Jeff and I had any number of conversations about how we really get things headed back in the direction that we all believe they should and can be. He was a full and willing and sort of participating partner in those conversations. I think we shared lots of very honest and open thoughts about where we were and what needed to get done. And and one thing he does not do is shy away from hard work and challenge. And he rolled up his sleeves and set about the business of trying to attack lots of those things and trying to restore sort of that edge that we had when Jeff and his crew first arrived here. We went from a team that was muddling around a little bit to a team that took the field with a sense of purpose and an identity. And I know one of the things he said repeatedly was, I want people to walk away from our games, win or lose, and say, hey, that team wearing the Purdue uniforms was the hardest playing team out there today and was the most aggressive team and all of that. And just sort of returning to some of those very fundamental tenets that I think served us really well and will serve us well as we go forward. And he is completely focused on that. I think you probably heard some of that yesterday and how he described what he wants the defense to look like. Right. But that's really across the board, just sort of retightening things up in lots of different ways, raising the level of expectation and accountability. But he is up for the fight and up for the challenge, and I think really excited by what we can get done. He repeatedly said to me during our conversations, hey, we can and we should win here, and we're going to do that. So I have great belief in Jeff's football knowledge and his ability to lead a team, and looking forward to getting back at that here, not only this spring but as we move towards the fall.
Your leadership, that's your role, and you've got to kind of stay in the pocket. I think last time we had you on, you said, well, I've got gray hair, but I may have a few more, but been a rough road. I mean, any leader in this type of situation with the pandemic has been that way. And for Jeff Brom, maybe a little bit of a new experience as a head coach. He's had programs that have lost before, as I think as an assistant, but this is a guy that's used to success. Yeah. And used to has expectations for success. He talks about that without being arrogant. What role do you play in that in terms of saying, this is my role almost as a mentor or as a colleague to help that get that message to a guy that may be going through a little bit of a new experience in terms of the last couple of years?
Well, I think anybody in a role like mine does it their own way and in their own personal style and twist on it. But one of the things that I would tell you that I did early on in our conversations with Jeff was remind him why we hired him, why I hired him, what I believed in then, what I continue to believe in now, and some of those most notable attributes of what he brought to us here at Purdue, and just to not lose sight of that. Don't get caught up in other things. Let's sort of return to the baseline, the foundational makeup of who you are and what your programs have looked like with you as the head coach when they've been successful. And if we do enough of that, I really believe that will serve us very, very well. So it wasn't me just. I don't think it's productive to just be critical. I mean, anybody can be critical. That's the easiest role to play in any play. Is just the critic. I mean, that's the easy part. But how do you find a way through challenging circumstances and challenging times is really the test of an organization and of leadership and all of that. And I clearly expressed where I felt we were coming up short, but I also reminded him that I believe 100% in his ability to lead us through it, and here's why. And I tried to give him specific examples of those things. And I think, again, we have a great working relationship. We can be very honest and open with each other, and that's when things work the best.
Yeah.
Where do you think it has to start, the solution?
Well, I think it starts every day, Brian. I mean, and I believe it started when our players got back here for the beginning of class on the 19th of January. And then the first thing you do is you have a team meeting, you get in the weight room, you start working out and conditioning and having a real sense of purpose and a focus. And it's an overused word, but it's a real word, and that's accountability. I mean, people need to be accountable for what they do on a day in, day out basis. And that's academically, that's in the weight room, that's studying their role and their position and the things they need to do in order to get better as players and be fully committed to that. And I think, again, not that we've gone way off the track, but it maybe wasn't as tight as it was when Jeff first got here. And I think just it's not the margin between where we were last year and where we would like to have been. I mean, you look at the scores, you remember how some of those games played out. I mean, it's this much now. This much feels like that much because when you look at the record, you're like, God bless, that wasn't very good, and it doesn't feel very good. It doesn't feel good to anybody. But that being said, if we can make incremental progress, I think the ability to shift that from a less than satisfying sort of a sick feeling in your stomach to one that you say, you know what, we're back at it here. We're back swinging and looking like that team that we believe we were building towards. I don't think that is not a far off dream, nor is that a reach in my mind. I think it's very achievable.
Yeah, call at Minnesota could have changed some things last year. Certainly, if the right call happens in that situation, certainly. But you look at where Jeff Brom has gone in the off season, and obviously the big story has been the hiring of three very coaches that have a lot of experience on the defensive side of the ball. What do you see there? What Purdue fans know Mark Hagan certainly, but what do you like about these guys, and what do you think that they're going to bring from a personality standpoint to this defense that is obviously an important part of getting this program where you want it?
Sure. Well, defense is the most violent part of the game, typically, and one of the things that I think that Coach Lambert, Coach Hagan, Coach English will bring to the table is an intensity, and a willingness to coach guys in an aggressive, not an over the line, but just in an aggressive way. When I stand out to practice and the defense is over on one side is on one field and the offense is on the other field, during when we're outdoors. You like to think that defensive side of the practice ought to be pretty loud. There ought to be a lot going on over there in terms of intensity and all of it. And I think that's what these guys will bring. They bring obviously a tremendous cross section of experience at very high levels and lots of very successful experience around big time programs. And I don't think there's any way that can help but make us better. Bringing the very best of what they've seen at their various stops. I don't think there's any question they'll be able to identify once they get a handle for our personnel what will be the best approach for us to be able to be successful. And the other part of that, and I know Jeff mentioned this yesterday, is his clear indication that he's going to spend a whole lot more time just making sure, spending time in the defensive staff room, on the field as needed, but making sure that the approach is one that really lines up with that aggressive and attacking mindset that he wants us to really return to, and that'll be not just on the defensive side of the ball. That's also on the offensive side. But I really like the experience that these guys bring. When you've got 3 guys that have basically been our coordinator, 4 guys, all 4 defensive full-time coaches are coordinator level minds and that level of experience, and I think they're going to work together extremely well. I got to believe the outcome from that will be really a positive for us.
Mike, he has a couple of former head coaches. He's got a bunch of coordinators now on his staff. As a leader, do you advise him to lean on the experience around him too? He kind of mentioned that yesterday, that's something he wants to do a little more, make sure everyone has a voice. Is that something you sort of advocate for with your coaches?
Absolutely. I think the very best coaches, again, there's always a point where you have to, the buck has to stop with the head coach. But I think getting the best thinking from the people around you, particularly those that have legitimate and substantive experience that can add to the table or add to the party, I think that's just smart. And I believe that Jeff has always been a guy that's been willing to listen and take observation. That has never been something that he's not like, I got the answers here. He is someone that listens. I mean, he listens to me after post game, whether it be Sunday or Monday, and I don't know half of a tenth of what he knows from a football perspective. If that's probably overstating it, but he listens. If I have an observation, he'll say, you know what, there's something there, and I don't think that will change at all. But I think when you have just better ideas and better experience to draw from, you almost inevitably land with a better outcome.
Managing change is a constant now. I mean, in the world. I mean, it's staying with the COVID-19 world, et cetera. I thought it was interesting yesterday because he talked about the idea of not only that, hey, I'm going to have turnover in my assistant coaches. That's the reality. Just like you're going to deal now with the transfer portal, you're going to deal with transfers across. I mean, it's just opened up a whole new world in college sports. How do you manage that from your perspective and help him? Because that's the role you have to play too. It's change is a constant now.
It is, and I think you can't obsess over it. You can't think that we're going to single-handedly be immune from that or change that dynamic. I mean, the world is different right now. We've on a much different level, but we've had in the last 2 weeks probably 3 or 4 staff resignations where people are, sort of during this COVID time, people have had lots of time to reflect and think about where they want to go and what's working and what's not working. And so, we're having that on the organizational side. And, we can't wring our hands over it. It's just a fact. It's just a reality. And you have to find a strategy that you believe will work in your organization to be able to manage effectively through whatever the environment presents itself as, and change will be part of it. I mean, that's just a very, very true statement. I would tell you that Jeff's deliberate approach to hiring the defensive coaches, which, we were at it for a good period of time, and we had any number of conversations about it, and he talked to lots of different people in order to try to find the very best combination of experience and personalities and fit and all those kind of things. And I think that's just what it's going to take going forward. I mean, you're going to have to be very thoughtful, very conscious about how you pick the people that you want to be in and around your program, whether that be staff, whether that be student athletes, and try to make the best decision in the moment, because trying to project too far out in these days it's a loser's exercise, I think, at this point.
Mike, I'm going to ask you a question. You're probably going to get asked about 150 different basketball teams here in the next month or two. But how do you view results in a pandemic year? Do you qualify any of it? Do you kind of use it to not draw as strong a conclusion as you might during a normal year? How do you kind of view that?
Well, I think, and you're talking across the board, sports?
Yeah, all across the board.
I think there are certain baseline fundamental pieces of a program and that you can always evaluate, pandemic or not. There's a sense of environment, of trajectory, of sort of the way that a program operates on a day-to-day basis, that honestly, the pandemic creates some issues, and you have to be aware of that and be honest about what the impact of that has been. But I don't think there's, you don't just wipe it off and say, well, that was just a pandemic year, it doesn't count. I mean, no, it counts. I mean, everybody's dealing with the pandemic. It's not just here at Purdue. It's not just, at IU or Michigan or Ohio State. It's everywhere. And so, it's sort of, there have been disruptions in and around everybody's operation this year. And I think while you don't penalize people for overly harshly for it, I don't think you ignore sort of the fundamentals of, hey, are we getting better? Are we making progress as a program or not? I think you still can perform those evaluations, particularly when you like myself and others in our department, we're around it every day. We see it every day. We're at practices, we're at games, and we're amongst the very few that can be at games. So we still get to see it, and so it's not impossible to continue to evaluate programs even in this environment.
I'm going to put your Anthony Fauci hat on because you're obviously started a season ticket campaign. You have to plan for the eventuality, you hope, of having a large number of folks in Ross-Ade Stadium come September 4th. What's been the thought process there? Again, we've all been through 11 months of this, and we're kind of getting used to the notion. We see a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, probably. But what's your mindset as you gear up from the financial end of that need to play? And it's a big need to play games in front of fans in stadiums and in Mackey Arena in 2021, 2022.
Well, our position at this point in time, Alan, is that we are approaching 21, 22, not with an unrealistic set of expectations, but a necessary set of expectation that we're going to be back at it, that our activity levels are going to return to what they were in years gone by. Now, we can't control the environment around us. We'll have to adjust and react, but you can't start planning for full activity in August. You've got to plan for it now. You've got to prepare for it. And I think we do see enough indicators in and around our world, around the country, that things are starting to move in a direction. As the vaccine rollout becomes more effective and more widely distributed, the level of people around the country that will be basically have achieved a level of immunity to it will get to a point where I think the country will reopen, and sporting activities along with other public gathering type things will be able to resume. And so we are planning for that for sure. We are anxious for that to happen. This year was beyond challenging in every way. We are continuing to try to manage the financial challenges that were presented. That is not easy. It has been a moving target throughout the entire year. I think we've taken as meaningful and as significant in actions on a relative basis as anybody has in the country. No one has tried harder and asked more of their people than we have. And to our folks' credit, they've really responded. But it's not over. We're still fighting through that. We're still staring at a 8-figure deficit. Those are not easy words to say. I don't sleep well at night knowing that that's the case. And we were trying to find ways to get through that. But I do believe that we'll be back at it next year. And even more broadly than just athletics here at Purdue, President Daniels and Provost Ackridge sent some communication out to the campus early this week or late last week. I can't remember exactly when it came out, but it really was talking about next year and about how we as a university are approaching next year as, hey, this is going to be a lot more like what we're accustomed to, if not fully what we're accustomed to. And that's how we're approaching the year. That's how we're going to plan for it. And that doesn't mean we're going to drop our guard or take anything for granted, but we intend to be back at it in a very significant way. And that's how we're going to work and plan until we're overcome by other circumstances, which I hope doesn't happen.
Brian, we got time for one more question in this segment. Go ahead.
Mike, do you have any sense yet as to where college athletes, college athletic staff, or whatever is going to fall in terms of access to the vaccine?
Do not. I don't know if we get any sense of moving ahead of the line or moving ahead of any line. We may just fall into the into the broader categories. I do believe that when vaccine availability becomes more prevalent, when there's just more of it available, Purdue has a plan to vaccinate the entire campus population, and that conceivably could be an April-May thing. So that's the time frame that if all goes well on the broader scale, and we have access to those vaccines, there will be a plan to do staff, students, everybody, and we would be part of that. I don't think we'd be preferentially treated in that, but we would be part of that, and that would be just fine in my book. We're managing through it really well right now. Our people have our sports medicine folks, our trainers, our coaches, our staff, our student athletes have really done a great job here since we've been back in the spring semester. Last week's report where we had 0 student athlete cases was one that honestly if I'd had a bar in my office, I'd have had a drink and celebrated that one. That was a great moment. We'll bounce back a little bit. I think we got 3 cases that have emerged since, but in a relative sense, we're doing very, very well. But that vaccine will be important, and I think that's just from a psychology perspective. I think that's an important thing for people to know that, hey, I'm protected more than just by my mitigation measures. I've got a level of actual sort of biological protection that I'm dealing with here.
Right.
That's one of the goals of this show. Is it's Friday afternoon. We want to bring alcohol into this some point in time. You'll be our first test case. No, and I don't.
What's to say we haven't started already?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't mean to be.
What do you think's in here?
Yeah, I don't mean to be
I'm setting a bad example here,
Mike, because it's the most serious and difficult of circumstances. Okay, we will take a short break and come back for segment 2 of Gold and Black Live. So stay tuned, and we'll be back with Mike Bobinski for more. We'll talk a little hoops and what he'll be doing throughout the month of March, and where he'll be throughout much of the month of March as well. So stay tuned for segment 2 of Gold and Black Live.